Our presentation is about application permissions and how they can be misleading and give companies such as Facebook a lot more information than we might expect. My name is Dawood Nadarath, and this presentation was created by myself, Sam Britton, and Roman Soriano. The big question we wanted to answer was, is Facebook recording everyone's calls without people's permissions? And no, they're not recording calls. However, they were storing call logs of Android users, although it wasn't exactly without permission. We'll explain that particular issue later on. Right now, we want to talk about these permissions. Permissions are rules set by the operating system that say what an app can or cannot do or access. Every app on your phone has specific permissions that are defined by the operating system but agreed to by the user. However, it's not always clear exactly what you're agreeing to. For example, there was an issue when Pokemon Go launched, the app that had total control of your entire Google account, including the ability to send and read all your emails, which is functionality the game doesn't necessarily need to work properly. The Pokemon Go incident was most likely an oversight. Essentially, the application asked users for full account access, which just about every user agreed to. The company behind Pokemon Go released a statement and corrected the issue, but how was this not noticed until a few weeks after launch? It's probably because users agreed to give the application full account access as they didn't understand what full account access entails, and users also usually don't take the time to read what permissions are being requested. This leads us to our main focus, the permissions required by Facebook Messenger. As you can see, the list is very extensive, and although it's pretty clear why most of these requirements are necessary, others such as send sticky broadcast are a little less clear. The thing to take from this is that Android has an accept all and move on style of permissions, which is neglected as soon as possible by most users. Here's the tweet from user at Dylan McCain's with a Z, which was initially what started the public response to the unusual data collection from Facebook. So, what exactly did Facebook do here? When you install Messenger on your phone, you're met with this prompt and this friendly Yeti over here. In large letters, it simply reads, text anyone in your phone, which seems pretty standard. The smaller text lists all the other permissions it's asking for, such as being able to continuously upload information about your contacts, including your call and text history. Afterwards, the prompt simply reads that it's asking for permission to access your contacts, but that permission gives the application access to all your contacts information as well, such as phone numbers and names, not to mention your call and text history. Although Facebook was storing this information, users technically agreed to give them permission to do so. Facebook should have been clearer about this and not tried to intentionally mislead its users into believing they were only giving it permission to text people in their contacts. Facebook responded with a statement stating that this feature was opt-in, and they also claimed to not sell any of this data and that they don't store the context of your calls and texts. This isn't the first time Facebook has sort of exploited app permissions. Another example of this happened in 2015. For applications such as Facebook to update without being opened, they must periodically refresh in the background. However, some users prefer to turn this feature off in order to conserve battery as well as privacy. Facebook decided to try working around that. They made their app play a silent audio track to keep the application running in the background even with the background app refresh turned off. This was a huge battery drain for users and overall just a sneaky thing for Facebook to do. They claimed it was accidental, but regardless, the main issue is not what they did, but that they were able to do it in the first place. Now, we'll take a look at how this lines up with the ACM and IEEE codes of ethics. First, ACM Clause 1.7 states that we should respect the privacy of others. Facebook has violated this by misleading users into giving them permission to store their text and call logs, and the creators of operating systems have also inadvertently enabled Facebook to do so by granting them a lot of power with a single permission that grants the access to contacts. IEEE Section 7.3 states to be honest and realistic in stating claims or estimates based on available data. Facebook has been dishonest by misleading users to agree to vague permissions, as well as by trying to exploit permissions for their own gain, such as getting around the background refresh exploit. The biggest problem in all of this is that the operating system permissions give applications access to a lot of information that they don't really need. Currently, iOS permissions are split up into smaller portions. Rather than granting applications access to contacts, they break them up into smaller permissions. Android is a bigger offender in these all-or-nothing permissions that give away too much information, but that seems to be changing in their newest release, Android M, and the permissions look more or less like iOS permissions. Permissions also need to be reviewed and updated constantly for security because these two permissions related events we've discussed happen years apart and they could easily happen again. Carnegie Mellon University is researching a potential solution to this problem by developing an app that details exactly which apps are using which permissions and giving users the ability to revoke permissions. They even differentiate between permissions that are necessary for the application's core functionality and permissions that may be just for advertisers to use. The only issue with this is that it can be overwhelming for users to see such an extensive list of permissions, and we get back to the issue of users not reading exactly what the permissions do, which is kind of how this whole thing started anyways. Who's really to blame in all of this? It's both the developers abusing the permissions and the developers implementing imperfect permissions. These permissions shouldn't be abused, and it's the responsibility of any developer who finds such vulnerabilities to not abuse them and instead seek that they be fixed. Unfortunately, the fact is that these permissions won't be perfect and may occasionally have such vulnerabilities. In both the Facebook Messenger as well as the Pokemon Go case, the extent of what these applications could do was excessive and unnecessary, as well as without explicit permission from the user. Even when permission was given, it was often in a very misinformed manner. Application developers have a responsibility to respect the permissions that are put in place by system designers, as well as to be transparent to their users about what data they're collecting and storing. Mobile system designers also need to be proactive in order to prevent this from happening, and reactive in case it does happen to prevent any unintended privacy violations. Here are our references. And that concludes our presentation on application permissions and developers' responsibility to be transparent about acquiring said permissions. If you have any questions, go for it.